Brandon, federal officials demanded that Texas allow access to that high crossing area, but Texas leaders say that's not happening, and in fact, they're doubling down. And the state has installed rows of razor wire in Shelby Park and says more is being added along the border.
Why are you guys making it easier for people to enter the country illegally?
We are. Why do you think we are?
The Constitution itself is the supreme law of the land.
Texas seized control of the park and then began denying entry to Border Patrol agents.
Called Take Our Border Back. It kicks off Monday.
The border has now reached the boiling point that you now see governors getting involved. We have a trucker convoy coming down to the border. The American people are going to have to get involved.
Look at yesterday. Look at all this crap that's going on.
He actually said that. He said that. How dare he say that?
Well, you guys sued to cut razor wire that was put in place by Texas officials.
So that the Border Patrol could actually do their jobs.
The Border Patrol Union president is saying the Supreme Court's decision is going to undoubtedly encourage more illegal immigration. Do you guys know better than the Border Patrol Union?
Tensions between Texas and the Biden administration have reached a boiling point as the Lone Star State continues to defy an emergency injunction from the Supreme Court and block federal border agents into the state to cut razor wire it's been installing over the past few weeks.
Texas now receiving support from 25 Republican governors, all backing Governor Abbott's border actions, blaming the Biden administration for the crisis.
Border Patrol needs to have access in order to do their job. They just do.
Governor Abbott says Texas is doing what it has to do with the backing of the Constitution.
Regardless of what federal statute may exist, the supremacy clause means that the Constitution itself is the supreme law of the land. The Constitution itself provides Texas with a right of self-defense in this case because the United States has abandoned its responsibility to defend Texas.
It was all planned decades ago, and sadly, things will go from bad to worse.
We need to solve this problem.
Illegal immigration.
Illegal immigrants.
You come from Mexico.
Angel Island immigration.
It is a national security concern. We are not
It's a human rights issue.
Comprehensive immigration reform.
Democrats think even if something doesn't pass, they can get the politics of this are very
complicated.
I'd like to see something done about the illegal alien problem.
Immigration must be a priority.
I'm going to do everything I can to get an immigration bill.
Comprehensive bill.
That will give us once again control of our borders. And with regard to friendship.
Whether you're for or against the surge in illegal immigrants flooding the United States, know that this crisis is a creation of powerful groups and individuals working on behalf of the enemy to subjugate our country.
We're going to talk about immigration now, gentlemen.
Children are brought here by coyotes and lots of bad people, cartels, and they're brought here, and they used to use them to get into our country. And we let people in, but they have to come in legally.
Vice President Biden, let me bring you into this conversation. Quick response, and then another question to you.
These 500-plus kids came with parents. They separated them at the border to make it a disincentive to come to begin with. They cannot, it's not coyotes didn't bring them over, their parents were with them. They got separated from their parents. And it makes us a laughing stock and violates every notion of who we are as a nation.
Just ask one question. Who built the cages? I'd love you to ask him that. Who built the cages?
Let me ask about your immigration policy, Mr. Vice President. The Obama administration did fail to deliver immigration reform, which had been a key promise during the administration. It also presided over record deportations as well as family detentions at the border before changing course. So why should voters trust you with an immigration overhaul now?
Democrats and Republicans can go on and on pointing fingers at one another, but the real players are hiding in plain sight. Unfortunately, America as we know it will never be the same again. The current border crisis and surge in illegal immigrants are all part of the concerted efforts and highly thought-out plan to undermine America's sovereignty, something that those who champion one world government and religion desperately crave.
Illegal border crossings break a new record, with CBP reporting over 300,000 encounters in December, the highest month ever recorded.
Well, for one thing, they're not just coming here on their own dime. The United Nations, it turns out, is spending hundreds of millions of dollars in cash handouts, food, shelter, something called humanitarian transportation, really every human need that is required to make the long journey through Latin America, Central America, and Mexico. And who pays the UN? Who's the UN's major funder? It's the U.S. taxpayer is paying for this. How do we know this? Because there's a brand new budget document that the UN puts out for 2024. They're going to spend $1.6 billion to help 3 million illegal immigrants move through 17 different countries of Latin America and the Caribbean and Mexico. And that includes $370 million in cash cards, debit cards, $25 million in transportation assistance to help them move through. And the budget document also clearly shows that they are witting, that they know that these are illegal immigrants and that they are moving illegally through their own member states. And they're using 248 NGOs to help hand out the cash.
What you see is a well-thought-out plan, in part by the papacy, to bring the United States, a Protestant nation, under her papal control.
And then a person who thinks only about building walls, wherever they may be located, and not building bridges, is not a Christian. This is not in the gospel. I say only that this man is not a Christian if he has said things like that.
And I'm a very good Christian because the Pope said something to the effect that maybe Donald Trump isn't Christian, okay? And he's questioning my faith. I was very surprised to see it, but I am a Christian. I'm proud of it. Okay, for a religious leader to question a person's faith is disgraceful.
A well-respected journalist who worked for British intelligence during World War II forewarned us about the current immigration crisis and its motives.
The late Avro Manhattan was born in 1914 and died in 1990. He was writing about the papacy's future plans that people are now debating today. In the mid-1980s, he wrote a book titled The Vatican Moscow-Washington Alliance, and he carefully studied the demographics in the United States and showed how the papacy will use immigration as a political weapon. He said that the naturally generous Catholic birth rate and the legal, clandestine, and openly illegal immigrants from Central and South America by 1985 had reached 13 million. With another invisible 3 to 4 million without leaving any record or trace. These millions, it must be remembered, were not only potential citizens of the US, but have become de facto members of the Catholic Church in America. Immigration has always been a hot topic in the United States. The flood of Hispanics from Latin America are Roman Catholics, and their poverty and hardships they face in their countries by US-backed leaders and US corporations hijacking their land rights will be used as a political tool by the papal hierarchy, where what she says will be followed by the highest political figures in the United States.
Are these statements mere conjecture, or is there an iota of truth that, indeed, the papacy, working with powerful institutions and governments such as the United Nations, is working to flood the United States with Catholics from Central and South America? What are high-ranking Catholics in the United States saying about the immigration issue?
In some ways, of course, I had the privilege to serve as vice president with Cardinal Dolan, and that was a joy. I think in all cases, I think the Bishops' Conference is serving our nation well.
Let's move on to a letter you recently wrote. And this was about immigration reform just this week. And you're urging that the Congress act now, the time is now, and this is a moral issue. And obviously, the churches are dealing with this every day. These people are in the parishes and at the doors, asking and needing help. And you wrote, there's a need to balance the protection of human rights with the rule of law.
Those who have a right to stay, whether it's refugee status or asylum, I always reference the National Catholic Conference of Bishops statement in which they said the baby Jesus was a refugee from violence. Let us not turn away from these children and send them back into a burning building. That's the bishops.
So Catholic bishops, who take orders directly from the Pope, are influencing our political leaders to allow more migrants into the country. To be clear, this video is not about Democrats or Republicans being right or wrong on the immigration crisis. We're looking at the events around us through the lens of Bible and prophecies.
When the Latino vote proved decisive in President Obama's re-election, the political landscape began to shift.
Senators crossing the aisle to work on immigration reform.
There is a new appreciation on both sides of the aisle. And believe it or not, I've seen some glimmer of bipartisanship out there.
For the first time ever, there's more political risk in opposing immigration reform than in supporting it.
And to those members of Congress who question my authority to make our immigration system work better, or question the wisdom of me acting where Congress has failed, I have one answer. Pass a bill. Scripture tells us that we shall not oppress a stranger, for we know the heart of a stranger. We were strangers once too. My fellow Americans, we are and always will be a nation of immigrants. We were strangers once too. And whether our forebears were strangers who crossed the Atlantic, or the Pacific, or the Rio Grande, we are here only because this country welcomed them in and taught them that to be an American is about something more than what we look like, or what our last names are, or how we worship.
Wow. Obama is quoting scripture like Nancy Pelosi to give amnesty to immigrants.
The Bible encourages Christians to welcome strangers, and we should champion that. But, as shown previously, what we're experiencing at the border does not align with what the Scripture teaches. Indeed, some people genuinely need asylum due to religious persecution. Sadly, many of them don't get the help they desperately need because of corruption and the failure of our leaders to do what is right.
And all senators know that the Catholic vote is essential to win the presidential election campaign when running for the commander-in-chief. And Obama's policies have been endorsed by the papal hierarchy in the United States. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops has given a warm welcome to proposals that could allow up to 4 million immigrants who entered the country illegally to give a legal status. Archbishop Joseph E. Kurtz, president of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, said the president's move was a sufficient and positive step. We welcome any efforts that protect individuals and protect and reunite families and vulnerable children, said the Archbishop.
Hopefully, it is beginning to make sense why we see a surge in people from South and Central America crossing the U.S. border. It is a well-orchestrated operation. Hundreds of thousands of these migrants are handed millions of U.S. taxpayer dollars.
They say that it's for the most vulnerable, but they're planning to hand out debit cards and cash equivalents to 624,000 illegal immigrants in 2024. None of them look particularly vulnerable to me. A lot of them are grown men, they're adults. They don't seem weak or sick or anything like that. They say it's for the most vulnerable, but I don't see it. I'm sure there are some vulnerable people that are receiving this cash aid, but I also think that they just want to help as many illegal immigrants as possible move to the United States. And they know it and they say it in the budget document, which is linked in my New York Post and the Center for Immigration Studies piece that I published on this matter.
It is very sad that in many cities across America, there are millions of poor people. There are many homeless people, including veterans, who fought wars started by warmongering politicians. But our leaders have done little to nothing to care for Americans. The Bible warned that things would get worse shortly, before the second coming of Jesus Christ. However, because God is sovereign, we should not fear what's happening today, as scary as it may seem. But make no mistake, we are entering some turbulent times our world has not experienced in a long, long time. If you understand what happened during the Dark Ages when the papacy dominated most parts of Europe, then you can make sense of the great tribulation our world will likely face in no distant future unless the Lord of heaven and earth, Jesus Christ, intervenes. Maranatha. Please help us spread biblical truth. Subscribe, like, and share.